The snow didn't stop falling. It had fallen through the night, masking blood and bodies alike, and it continued now, soft, silent, mocking. King Stannis Baratheon stood at the gates of Winterfell, his face gaunt, beard rimmed with frost, and gaze fixed on the castle he had bled for. Around him the last cries of the dying faded beneath the hush of snowfall. Victory. It was a bitter word on his tongue. Ser Davos stood beside him, blood on his cloak and ash on his boots. "It's done, your grace," he said. "Ramsay Bolton is dead. Winterfell is yours." Stannis nodded, though his eyes never moved. Then let the banners be raised. Overhead, the stag of House Baratheon unfurled in the wind, its shadow stretching over the broken ramparts of House Stark's ancestral home. Stannis did not smile. There was no joy in conquest, only the next war. He marched through the open gates. Snow mixed with the blood in the courtyard, where hundreds of men, Bolton, Manderly Umbers, had fallen. Sansa still gasped for life, though their eyes were distant, looking past the world. Stannis looked down at the face of Ramsay Bolton. Frozen lips curled into a grotesque grin even in death. His hounds had turned on him before the end. Fitting, thought Stannis. The boy had ruled with cruelty, with chaos. He had flayed nobles, hunted girls. This was no victory for righteousness. It was justice paid in the coin of fire and steel. He turned to Melisandre, who had appeared as if summoned by the wind itself. Her red robes were pristine, untouched by snow, her face lit by an inner flame. "The Lord of Light has brought you." "Through the darkness," she said. Stannis's voice was hoarse. "At what cost?" She said nothing. She never did when it came to that. Shireen. The memory struck him like a hammer. Her screams, her eyes begging, the smoke. He clenched his jaw and walked faster, through the empty halls of Winterfell. His new seat, his cold throne. They buried the dead in mass graves. There were too many to name, too many to mourn. Some northern houses bent the knee quickly, eager to distance themselves from the Boltons. Others remained silent. The Umbers had disappeared into the hills. Manderly men muttered treason under their breath. In the great hall, Stannis sat at the high table brooding. "They do not love me," he muttered to Davos. "No, your grace," Davos said honestly, "but they respect your strength. Fear is not loyalty. The North remembers. And they remember Stark." Davos hesitated. "We've had ravens. There are rumors that Sansa Stark lives, that she escaped the Boltons, that she was here at Winterfell before the battle." Stannis's brow furrowed. "If true, she is key to securing the North. A Stark girl would unite the houses faster than 100 victories. And what then? Then she will kneel." That night, Melisandre came to him with fire in her eyes. "He is not dead," she whispered. "The snowborn son, the one who rose. I saw him in the flames." Stannis stared at her. "Jon Snow? He has returned. The Lord of Light has chosen him, as I once thought he chose you." Stannis stood. "He is a bastard. He is more than that now. Death could not hold him." Stannis turned from her. "Then I will meet this ghost myself." Days passed. Winterfell became a fortress once more. Baratheon banners flew, but the halls echoed with Stark ghosts. Snow fell thicker. Rumors thickened with it. Then came word. A host of wildlings and black-clad warriors approached. At its head rode a man with eyes like northern sky, cold, clear, filled with questions. Jon Snow had returned, and Stannis Baratheon would soon learn that not all battles are won with swords. Some are won in the hearts of men. Some are lost in fire and snow. The fire in the hearth could not banish the cold. Winterfell's great hall, once alive with Stark laughter and northern pride, now sat shrouded in silence. Baratheon soldiers patrolled the walls, wary of shadows that felt more like spirits than enemies. Stannis Baratheon, seated on the high seat, surveyed the empty chairs that flanked his table, chairs that had once held wards of the North, now scorched or silent. "They will not come," Ser Davos said. "They will," Stannis replied, but even he sounded unsure. The ravens had flown. To House Manderly, to the Ricewells, Karstarks, Hornwoods and Dustins, all had received the same. "Command," Swear fealty or be declared traitor. Some replied with words of loyalty. Most sent none at all. Winter was here, and the North had learned to trust only itself. Outside the gates of Winterfell, a new host had arrived. Not enemies, not yet, but not allies either. Jon Snow stood at the head of the party, wildlings at his side, black brothers of the Night's Watch behind him, his direwolf ghost prowling like a pale shadow. His eyes rose to the battlements of his family's stolen home. I swore I'd never come back here, he muttered. Tormund Giant's Bane chuckled. Yet here you are. You sure you trust this king? Jon said nothing. The two men met beneath Winterfell's roof, one a resurrected bastard, the other a self-proclaimed king. Stannis regarded Jon with cold scrutiny. So it's true, he said. You live. I died, Jon replied. I didn't stay that way. Melisandre stood behind Stannis, her red eyes gleaming. He is reborn for a purpose, she murmured. The Lord of Light chose him. Stannis's jaw tightened. She once said the same of me. Jon's expression remained unreadable. I didn't come for thrones. I came for the living. The White Walkers have breached the wall. Eastwatch is gone. A silence fell. Even Stannis seemed shaken. How many? Thousands, Jon said, and more with every village they take. Despite the dire news, not all within Winterfell focused on the coming doom. A rider came the next day bearing a name thought lost, Sansa Stark. She rode through the gates with Brienne of Tarth beside her, dressed in furs and the quiet defiance of a Stark woman. When she stepped into the hall, even Stannis stood. Lady Sansa, he said, your name carries weight in these halls. Sansa didn't bow. This is my home, she said, and my people. You may sit on my father's seat, but it does not belong to you. Davos moved forward. My lady, the king, there is no king in the north, she snapped. Her voice was steel wrapped in snow. There is only Stark blood, and it does not burn for Baratheons. Later that night in the Godswood, Jon and Sansa stood beneath the heart tree. I thought you were dead, she whispered. I was. She touched his arm just to be sure he was real. And now you live again. For what? Jon looked at her. For this, for the people. I don't care about crowns. But the people need someone who does, she said. Stannis is not that man. He rules with fear. He's not wrong about the threat beyond the wall. No, she admitted, but that doesn't make him right for the north. In the great hall, a storm brewed. Northern lords began to arrive quietly, in ones and twos, Manderly men, Serwyns, even a few reluctant Umbers. They came not for Stannis, but because of whispers. The Starks live, Jon Snow lives, Sansa Stark has returned, and with them came a question louder than any horn of war. Who will the North follow? Jon? A bastard raised at the wall who had no claim but every ounce of honor? Sansa? A true-born Stark, survivor of Boltons and Lannisters alike? Or Stannis? The king of law, fire and command, but not love. At council, tempers flared. You speak of loyalty, Stannis said, but it is I who bled for this castle, I who broke the Boltons. You owe me your swords. Jon stood. We owe you thanks, but not our freedom. And who would you follow? Stannis asked coldly. A dead man. A girl? Sansa stepped forward. A Stark. The room shifted. Heads turned. Eyes watched. The old blood stirred. In his chamber, Stannis burned another raven scroll and looked into the fire. The North remembers, he whispered. But he feared what, and whose it remembered. The wind howled across Winterfell's ramparts, a mournful song of ice and memory. Snow clung to the towers like a shroud. Within the hall the walls pulsed with tension, each breath, each word, each movement heavy with meaning. They had crowned no king. Not yet. But the people were watching. Jon Snow walked among them. He had not asked for it. The stares, the hushed greetings, the children whispering his name like a prayer. But it followed him, the man who died and rose again. A ghost in the flesh, a Stark in all but name. When he passed the blacksmith's corner, an old man reached for his hand. My boy died at the wall, he rasped. He followed you. Thank you for bringing him honor. Jon had no reply. He simply nodded and walked on, haunted by 1,000 eyes and the weight of a world he never sought to carry. Stannis watched from the window, his face carved from stone. "They love him," he said. Davos stood beside him, unease in his posture. "They do, but they don't follow him, not yet. They will. And if they do," Stannis turned slowly, "then he will bend the knee, or I will break him." At council, the cracks widened. Jon urged for immediate action. "We must ride north," he insisted. "Castle Black is vulnerable. If the Night King marches, we need every sword." Stannis remained seated, fingers steepled. "And who leads? This war? Whoever the people trust?" "That sounds dangerously close to treason." "It sounds like survival," Jon shot back. Sansa watched the exchange with growing dread. The room pulsed with competing visions. Stannis's iron rule, First Jon's quiet resolve. No one spoke of Sansa for leadership, yet, but eyes found her too. That evening she found Jon alone in the crypts. He stood before their father's statue, hands clasped, face pale in torchlight. "He's the only father I ever knew," Jon said. "He was more than that to me," Sansa replied softly. "He was hope, and now we're all that's left of him, all that's left of—" Jon looked at her. "They want someone to follow." "I know. It should be you." She shook her head. "They'll never follow a woman without a sword." Jon hesitated. "Then it should be you and me." Their eyes met. Something ancient stirred. Not love, not exactly, but the bond of blood, of stark roots grown deep in northern frost. Meanwhile, Melisandre burned her prayers alone. The flames whispered names. Snow. Flame. Wolf. Light. She had seen it clearly now. Stannis was never the one. The fire had lied. Or perhaps she had misunderstood. But Jon was more than fire. He was winter reborn. In the yard the next morning, a gathering formed. Unplanned. Unspoken, but inevitable. Jon trained with wildlings and brothers of the Watch, his movements precise, his instincts sharpened by death itself. Watching were dozens of northern men, young, old, lord and peasant alike. A boy called out, "Lord Snow!" Another corrected him, "King Snow!" Jon froze mid-swing. It wasn't meant to start, not like this. But men began chanting soft at first, then louder. "The king in the north, the white wolf, the bastard Stark." Sansa stood in the shadows of the gate, her heart thundering. And above, on the ramparts, Stannis Baratheon turned away, jaw clenched. He descended into the tower, flames dancing behind his eyes. That night thunder rolled. Stannis summoned Jon to the war room. Alone. "You will not take what is mine," he said, voice like a blade unsheathed. Jon didn't flinch. "I don't want your throne, but they offer it to you all the same. You think you can keep it and remain innocent. You think rulership comes without blood." "I've bled," Jon said, "and I'll bleed again, but I won't kneel to a man who burns children." Silence. It hit like a sword across the room. Stannis stepped forward. "You know nothing of war." Jon met his gaze. "And you've already lost it." The next dawn a raven flew north, to the wall, to the wildlings, to what remained of the Night's Watch. It carried these words: "Winterfell is no longer Baratheon. It remembers its wolves." And across the north the fires of rebellion began to flicker, not against an outsider, but a would-be king who no longer wore a crown in the hearts of the people. Melisandre stared into the flames, her eyes wide and unblinking. The fire cracked and hissed, curling like a serpent around half-burned logs. Visions danced behind the smoke, a direwolf made of ash, a boy reborn beneath falling snow, a crown of ice shattering beneath a sky filled with wings. Her voice was low, reverent. "He is the prince that was promised." Behind her, Ser Davos stood silent, his fists clenched, his thoughts heavy with the past. "She said the same of Stannis," he muttered. "Look where that led us." Melisandre's lips pressed into a line. "The flames do not lie, but sometimes we read them wrong." Davos turned away. "I watched a little girl burn because of your readings." Melisandre didn't answer. The fire said more than words ever could. And now it whispered a different name: Jon Snow. Within Winterfell's courtyard, Jon met with Tormund and the northern bannermen. They came to him now, the Manderleys, the Hornwoods, even skittish Karstarks who had once stood with the Boltons. Not in ceremony, not in ritual, but in quiet oaths whispered when Stannis wasn't listening. "You don't want a crown," Lord Manderley said, "but that's what makes you fit to wear one." Jon sighed. "You want a leader, not a martyr. We want someone who bleeds for the North, not someone who burns it." In the chambers of the keep, Sansa Stark penned a raven. She chose her words carefully, addressed to the Vale. To Lord Robin Arryn, Warden of the East, your cousin Sansa Stark calls upon the old ties between House Arryn and House Stark. The North bleeds, Winterfell stands. Come and see who wears its crown. She sealed it with the Stark direwolf sigil and handed it to the Maester. Brienne stood by the door. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm tired of being sure," Sansa said. "I want to win." Stannis held court. That night, but the hall was half empty. The lords who once attended him now sent excuses, or attended in silence, their eyes drifting toward the shadows where Jon often stood. When Stannis gave orders, they nodded, but no one moved with urgency. No one raised his banner. He could feel it, control slipping like snow through fingers. "You should never have come back here," he told himself later. "This place was never yours." Still, he sharpened his sword and waited. The North would follow him, or he would make them. In the Godswood, Melisandre approached Jon beneath the weirwood tree. "I saw you in the fire," she whispered. "You were surrounded by the dead, but you stood. You burned brighter than—" "All of them." Jon didn't turn. "I've had enough of flames and prophecies. You cannot deny your path. My path led to betrayal, to death. I came back for a reason, but I don't think it was thrones." Melisandre's hand hovered at his shoulder but did not touch. "You were chosen, not by kings, by the fire, by something older." "I serve the living," Jon said, "not the fire, not your god." And still, the flames flickered behind his eyes. Beyond the walls of Winterfell, darkness stirred. A lone ranger returned from the north, half frozen, bleeding, riding a dead horse. He collapsed at the gate, muttering only one word before slipping into unconsciousness. Hardhome. In the council chamber, chaos broke. Tormund slammed a fist on the table. "The walkers are marching. They've reached Last Hearth." Jon stood immediately. "We ride tonight." Stannis slammed his palm down. "You will do nothing without—" "My command." Jon met his eyes. "Then give the command." They marched toward us. "Let them come. We hold Winterfell." "We can't afford that," Jon said. "We need to fight them before they grow, before more dead join them." "I am king," Stannis said coldly. "Not for long," Sansa said quietly from her corner. All eyes turned. "You sit in my father's seat, but the people are done with fire. They want the North to remember." Stannis stared at her. "Careful." "Girl? I am not a girl," she snapped. "I am Sansa Stark of Winterfell, and you are a man who lost his crown the day he burned his daughter." The room fell silent. Even Davos said nothing. That night, Jon gathered his force, a mix of black cloaks, wildlings, and northern men who no longer waited for permission. They would ride to meet death, on their own terms. As they rode out, Sansa watched from the walls, a flicker of fear in her eyes. But something else, too. Hope. The fire may have once ruled Winterfell. But now the snow rose. The howl echoed across Winterfell just past midnight. It wasn't Ghost. This sound was deeper, older, a memory dug from the bones of the North itself. It rolled over the snow-covered fields like thunder, chilling even seasoned soldiers to the marrow. By dawn, the direwolf banners were flying, not Baratheon stags, not Targaryen dragons, Stark wolves. Jon Snow's host had departed Winterfell under cover of night, bound north to intercept the dead near Last Hearth. What remained behind was not silence, but tension ready to snap. Lord Manderley gathered his men. The Serwyns, the Glovers, and even some deserters from Stannis' army began whispering the same words. The North belongs to the Starks. At the heart of it all stood Sansa. She didn't raise a sword. She didn't shout. She simply stood, in the courtyard of her home with her hair braided like her mother's, and let the past speak through her. "I do not claim to be queen," she told the gathering lords, "but I am a Stark of Winterfell, And I remember. They knelt, not to a queen, but to a home they had lost, and now found again. In the tower, Stannis brooded. The fire in the hearth barely touched the frost settling in his bones. The room had grown colder since Jon had left, though the temperature had not changed. It was the loyalty that had turned. He turned to Davos. "You were once a smuggler. Tell me, how does one hold something slipping through their fingers?" Davos didn't answer. He was watching Sansa from the window, standing among lords with quiet dignity. "You've lost this castle, Your Grace," he said softly. "Not by sword, by heart." Farther north, Jon Snow reached Last Hearth, or what remained of it. Smoke rose from blackened timbers. The castle was a ruin, frost-covered corpses strewn like broken dolls. Some had been burned, others hadn't. Then fast enough, Tormund knelt beside a child frozen in place, wide-eyed and pale. "They didn't even scream," he muttered. Jon said nothing. His jaw clenched, Ghost paced beside him, fur bristling, ears twitching. "They were here recently," Jon said, "and they're moving." "South," Tormund growled. "They're hunting." Jon turned to the others. "We light the pyres. We burn them all. Then we ride to Moat Cailin. We'll hold them at the choke." "And what of Winterfell?" Ed asked. Jon stared into the smoke. "They'll have to choose, the living or the burning crown." Back at Winterfell, Melisandre stood atop the ramparts, watching the ravens scatter like black snowflakes across the sky. She could feel the storm approaching, but it was not fire that would win this battle. It was the old gods. In the godswood, the weirwood tree bled red sap like tears, its carved face twisted as if in warning. She no longer looked into the flames. They had grown silent, distant. Jon Snow had become the fire now, and Stannis was only ash. On the fourth day after Jon's departure, Stannis called his banners. Only half arrived. Those who did looked uneasy. Many left their sigils at home. Some wore wolf pins beneath their cloaks. The north was no longer his to command, so he gave orders instead to take Sansa into custody. But when his knights approached her chambers, they found the room empty. She was gone, fled in the night, with Brienne and a dozen loyal riders, headed north toward Jon. Stannis seethed. "She dares run from my protection?" "She ran from your judgment," Davos said sharply. "She's not your enemy. She'll become one if she crowns that bastard." "The bastard saved the north," Davos said. "You just sat in its chair," Stannis raised his voice. "He undermines the law." "And you," Davos said, "undermine the north." Stannis stared long and hard at the Onion Knight. "I made you my hand. But I forgot. Your heart has always beat for someone else." Davos took off the pin and laid it on the table. "My heart beats for what's right, and this is not it." The wolves howled again that night, but now they were not alone. Atop the walls of Winterfell, a scout shouted, "Riders in the distance, dozens, hundreds, not enemy." Northern, stark banners raised, snow-covered armor. Lords and knights who had hidden too long now rode to reclaim their home. The North had chosen, and it would not kneel to fire. At the head of the host rode Sansa Stark, her hair loose in the wind, her expression unshaken. Behind her, thousands of voices howled the same word. "Snow, Stark! The North remembers." The cold was different now. It wasn't the chill of snow or wind. It was silence. An ancient, creeping stillness that pressed against the soul, the kind of cold that knew your name and whispered it back in the dark. The dead were near. Jon Snow stood at Moat Cailin, his cloak stiff with frost, his eyes scanning the horizon. What had once been a ruin was now a fortress reborn, a final line between life and oblivion. Fires burned along the walls, wildlings sharpened weapons. Northern soldiers prayed in silence. Beside him, Sansa Stark adjusted her fur hood. "You think they'll come tonight?" "They're already here." She glanced at him but said nothing. The quiet between them was a kind of peace. Jon turned to Tormund, Ed, and Brienne. "This is where we hold. If Winterfell falls, if the North falls, there's nowhere left to run." Tormund grinned. "Then we don't run." In Winterfell, Stannis stared at the empty hall. The lords were gone, the banners taken down, his men fractured. Even Melisandre had vanished in the night, leaving only a burnt log and a whisper of ash. Behind, he had won Winterfell by war, but he had lost it to a ghost. He stood before the heart tree one last time and asked no questions. The old gods gave no answers. When he mounted his horse, he wore no crown, only a sword. That night the sky broke, the wind howled as white figures emerged from the forest, blue eyes shining like cursed stars. The army of the dead crested the horizon, endless and slow, a wave of death dragging ice and despair behind it. They struck at the walls of Moat Cailin like a tide. Jon met them at the gates, sword drawn, ghost by his side. Every blow was a prayer, every breath a borrowed second. Tormund fell early, laughing even as a wight dragged him down. Brienne stood above Sansa, her blade flashing until her arm went numb. And when Jon faced a White Walker alone, on the bridge it shattered Longclaw against the thing's spear, until the shards of Valyrian steel drove through its heart anyway. At the height of the battle, fire lit the sky. From the south riders came, but not enemies. Stannis Baratheon, cloaked in ash and frost, charged into the night with his remaining men. Davos beside him, no crown, no banners, just steel and fury. For once, Stannis did not come to conquer. He came to fight, and die if the gods willed it. Sansa stood atop the wall, commanding archers. She saw them ride through the undead like a blade of flame through parchment. Stannis reached Jon in the center of the field. Their eyes met, no words, just a nod. For one moment, there were no kings, no bastards, no rightful heirs, only men, only the living. Then the sky cracked, a shadow moved through the clouds. Viserion, the undead dragon. Wings of ice, fire of frost. He descended like a comet, blasting blue flame across the wall. Dozens died in seconds. Jon stared in horror until another roar answered. Drogon, Daenerys Targaryen, arrived from the east, Rhaegal beside her. Dragons collided above the field, fire and frost clashing in a storm of wings. For the first time the sky burned with both ends of prophecy, ice and fire, locked in war. On the ground the Night King emerged. Stannis rode toward him. "You will not take this kingdom," he roared. The Night King said nothing. One look, one raise of his hand, and Stannis Baratheon burned, not in fire but frozen from within, his body cracking to the earth like brittle glass. Sansa screamed. Jon ran. They met in the center of the storm, Jon Snow and the Night King. Longclaw broken, no allies near, just steel, blood and fate. And yet, from the fire behind him, Melisandre stepped through the flames. She did not speak. She only touched Jon's shoulder and whispered something into the wind. His eyes widened, his breath stilled. Then he drew Stannis's fallen sword, Lightbringer, cowed once again by blood and belief, and he plunged it into the Night King's heart. The world held its breath. Then the dead collapsed. Viserion crashed in a storm of ice. The night fell silent. Only the wind remained. Jon fell to his knees. Sansa ran to him, her hands shaking. "You're bleeding," she said. Jon looked up at her, smiling faintly. "It's finished." But at what cost? He looked around. The bodies, the smoke, the silence. Everything. Winterfell stood again, blackened but alive. Jon refused the crown. Sansa took it. Not as queen, but as warden of the North. "She is the North," Jon said. "I am only its sword." Daenerys returned to Dragonstone. The war was done. The dragons were dying. So were the dreams, but peace. Peace lived. In the Godswood, the trees whispered a new name, not of kings, but of the boy who rose, fought, and walked away. Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell, the last wolf.